Prost! All right, guys, welcome back to our channel. I am Lee, and with my wife Betty, who is a little camera shy, we are the traveling expats, and we're sharing our life in Germany and our travels throughout the world. All right, so today I want to talk about one of those things that almost every traveler, every tourist who comes to Germany is very interested in, and that is beer. And I want to talk about German beer culture, and I want to talk about American beer, and I want to talk about, comparison between the two, and maybe a little bit of Belgian beer as well, right? So the questions I have: does Germany really produce the best beer in the world? Is American beer really weak and tasteless? And if it is, why is it that way? And what about these American craft brews or micro brews? Are they really? Do they really live up to all the hype? And what about Belgian beer? A lot of Americans love Belgian beer. Is it really good? All right, so let's talk about it. But before I get started, I want to just mention that I happen to love German beer. I think it's fantastic, and it's one of the things that I really miss about Germany when I'm away, when I'm traveling outside of the country. So let's get started, and Prost, let's go. Okay, so the first thing I want to cover, I want to cover some statistical data about beer, right? So according to the World Population Review, beer is one of the oldest beverages in the world. In fact, beer's been around longer than written language has been around. So people have been drinking beer longer than they've been writing books or writing letters. It is the most widely consumed alcoholic beverage in the world. And this is according to the Oxford Companion for Beer. It's the third most popular drink in the world of all types. And it's even drinking more often and more regularly than coffee, which really surprised me. But again, that's according to the Oxford Companion for Beer. The only two beverages that are drinking more than beer are water and tea. So a lot of people drink beer, right? Now, many Americans think that Germany is the king of beer. They think all Germans drink beer, and they drink beer at all time of the day, and they have this idea in their head that every day, everywhere in Germany is like, Oktoberfest in Munich, right? Well, of course, that's not true. And talking about the amount of beer drinking, Americans think Germans drink more beer than anyone, but in 2021, looking at some stats, the United States consumed the second most amount of beer in the world, right? China was actually number one. China drank more beer than any other country in the world, and Germany came in sixth place. Now, if you look at per capita or per person statistics, in 2021, Germany was ranked seventh. And so the average person in Germany drank 91.3 liters of beer in 2021. The United States ranked 24th per capita, with the average person drinking 72.9, so almost 73 liters of beer per person. But in the first place, and number one, was the Czech Republic. And they drank a stunning 140 liters of beer per person in 2021. So, in the Czech Republic, they drink a lot of beer. Now, talking about Germany, many Germans are very proud of their beer culture, right? And around the country in Germany, there are countless festivals that are held, and beer plays a central role in these festivals. And everybody can think of Oktoberfest. That comes to mind to people from all around the world. They think of a big beer festival, and that's what they think of. But beer culture in Germany is so much more. It isn't just about partying or getting drunk or anything like that. It's actually, it's a way. It's ingrained in the way of life. There are a lot of traditions and history, and in fact, in Bavaria, beer is actually classified as food. So that's how important beer is to culture in Bavaria. And in fact, talking about German beer culture, the oldest still enforced food law or food regulation in the world is the Bavarian, or now German, Reinheitsgebot from 1516. And this was the law or the regulation that controlled, basically it's a purity law is what it is, and it controls what can be used in the process of brewing beer. And the Reinheitsgebot from 1516 says that you can only use water, barley, and hops in brewing beer. Now, a few years later, in the mid 1500s, they added wheat. And then a little bit later, after science actually discovered that yeast is a thing, they added yeast. So basically now you can use water, barley, hops, wheat, and yeast to brew beer in Germany. And this was so important to the Bavarian way of life that Bavaria would not agree to join the German nation in 1871 unless the Reinheitsgebot was adopted as national law in Germany. So it was adopted, and then of course Bavaria did join Germany. So for over 500 years, the Reinheitsgebot has ensured that only these few ingredients are used to brew the highest quality beer in the world. And so Germans are very proud of that. Now, there is an exception. And to the best of my knowledge, the only beer in Germany that's allowed to be brewed that I guess violates the Reinheitsgebot is Gose. This is a beer that's it's brewed in Leipzig, and that's the only place that I'm aware they brew it. If you know somewhere else they brew Gose in Germany, let us know. But they brew Gose in Leipzig, and Gose actually contains coriander, which is, I think in America we call that cilantro. So coriander and salt are added. And so this makes it violate the Reinheitsgebot, but I guess it's granted an exemption or an exception based on historical significance. So Gose from Leipzig, I believe, is the only beer that's allowed to violate the Reinheitsgebot. And if you're traveling through Leipzig, I recommend you give it a try. It's pretty good, even on or especially on a warm summer day. It's good to quench your thirst. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about German beer. Now, what about American beer? So a lot of people will say, and especially a lot of Germans who tried it, will say that American beer is tasteless, it's bland, it's thin, it has no flavor. So my question is, why is that? How did it get that way? Because if you look at the history of brewing in the United States, it was started by German immigrants. Or were they expats? They really started the brewing industry in the United States in the mid 1800s. So in the mid 1800s, you had about about 5 million Germans immigrated to the United States. And they lived in an area known as the German Triangle. So it went from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to St. Louis, Missouri, and to Cincinnati, Ohio, then back up to Wisconsin. And if you look, historically, that's where most of the breweries in the United States are. So, towards the end of the 1800s, there were about 4,000 German-operated breweries in the United States. So these Germans are coming there, and they're opening up all these breweries. So, what happened? Did they forget how to brew beer, as they were crossing the Atlantic? I seriously doubt they did, but I think that there are really a couple of reasons why, American beer might taste a little bland and might not have that full-bodied flavor that you experience in Europe. And so it suffered from two things. Maybe three, but we'll talk about two. The first one was during this time in America, there was a growing anti-immigrant sentiment, which spread across the country. So, German immigrants, they were, a lot of people didn't like them, so they suffered hardships as, many immigrants do today. So you had that, and then that was really fueled in America after the two world wars. So there's, huge anti-German sentiment, so they suffered from that. And then, of course, the biggest reason, though, was Prohibition. So from 1920 to 1933, for a 13-year period in the United States, no one was legally allowed to brew beer. So the brewing industry basically, didn't exist during that time. And when it ended, there were just a few breweries that were still around. So we went from 4,000 breweries to about four of these really big companies, names that we still know today. There was Schlitz, there was Pabst, Miller, Anheuser-Busch. So those big names. And so they found ways to make products to sell during Prohibition to keep their companies alive. And then when Prohibition ended, they were more interested in producing something to make a lot of money than to produce something that tasted really good. So the quality of American beer really suffered due to Prohibition. And if you think about it, so most people went 13 years without drinking any beer. So when Prohibition ended, they pretty much drink anything, water flavored beer, because they really didn't know any better. So I think that is why, if you look historically, that is why American beer really doesn't have much flavor compared to German and other European beers. All right, so we've talked about the taste of American beer and how it's pretty bland. But a lot of people believe that German beer is not only much more flavorful, but it's also much stronger. It has a much higher alcohol content. A lot of people believe that, but actually that's not true. If you look at, there are some exceptions, of course, but if you look at most of the beer in Germany versus most of the beer in the United States, they're all right around 5% alcohol by volume. So pretty close. The alcohol level is pretty close between the two. Now, I believe that, this thought got perpetuated in the United States, probably because normally when you drink a beer in the United States, normally it's served to you in a 12-ounce either glass or 12-ounce container. So you're drinking 12 ounces of beer, which is about a third of a liter, if I'm not mistaken, about 0.3 liters. Now in Germany, when you're served a beer, it's almost always served in a half liter. Now, I know not Cologne. I know you're saying, oh, what about Kolsch? And yes, Kolsch is served in smaller glasses. I guess that's to keep it fresh while you're drinking it. I'm not really sure. But anyway, most of the places in Germany, you're going to be served a beer in a half-liter container versus 12 ounces in America. So normally, if you drink beer for beer, you drink 4 beers in Germany, you've actually drank a lot more amount of beer than you have in the United States. So obviously, you're drinking more alcohol. And just to kind of show you what this looks like, I have a standard German beer mug, that a half-liter mug of beer. And this, I have 12 ounces of apple juice, Apfelsaftschorle, actually. So I'm going to pour 12 ounces of beer, the size of American, in this German beer glass, and we'll see how it compares. All right, so German beer glass filled with the amount of beer you would normally get in America. So obviously you're drinking more alcohol, just simply because you're normally drinking more beer in Germany. And I think that's why people think German beer is more alcoholic. Okay, so this begs the question. And, a lot of my German viewers may be offended by this, but many American beer connoisseurs, or maybe you might call them beer snobs, they say when they visit Germany or live in Germany, they say they're disappointed by German beer. They say that German beer is boring. It all tastes the same. There's no variety. So are they crazy? Well, maybe. But so if they come from the United States, the land of bland beer, why do they say that when they get to Germany? And the reason is because in America we have this craft beer craze that the beer connoisseurs love. So in the mid 1960s in California, people were tired of drinking this bland American beer. So they wanted to add more flavor. So this trend started with craft beers. Some people call them microbreweries, and they produced beer mostly based upon the beer that's brewed in Europe, Germany, Belgium, places like that. Now, this trend grew, and by the late 1980s, 1990s, it was really huge along the west coast of the United States. And by now, it's spread all around the country. And pretty much any city of really any size has at least one craft brewery in the town, right? They brew all kinds of different brews. On average, a craft brewery in the United States will brew about 20 different types of beer. And And what I find out of those 20 beers, roughly half of them are some type of IPA, which I don't like. So I kind of think the craft brews are all the same because it seems like they're all IPAs to me, and I don't really care for that. And plus, they're pretty expensive. All right, so we've talked about these American beer connoisseurs, these beer snobs who say that German beer is disappointing and it's all kind of tastes the same and boring. But these people, they tend to love Belgian beer. And a lot of them, I think that's what they think German beer is going to be like when they come over. They think it's going to be like Belgian beer, but of course it's different than Belgian beer. Belgian beer offers, they say Belgian beer offers a greater variety and more beer flavors. And a lot of them really like these Trappist beers, which are beers that are brewed in monasteries, and they have, strict policies and regulations controlling the brewing of beer. Trappist beers are primarily in Belgium, but they are in some other countries, a few other countries in Europe. So these beer snobs, they really love Trappist beers. And, we talk about the Belgian beer culture, people love it. So UNESCO, the United Nations, has actually recognized the Belgian beer culture as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And, there is no such distinction in Germany. There is a push to get the Reinheitsgebot recognized by UNESCO, but so far that has not produced any results. Now, personally, I do like Belgian beer. I think it's really tasty, but to me, a lot of it tastes kind of sweet, and it also has, in general, a higher alcohol content. So I really don't drink it very often, and when I do, I don't drink very much of it. Now, my next point is a question that some people ask: is German beer being held back by the Reinheitsgebot? And I've heard Americans mention this. I've also heard some Germans ask this question, and other Europeans. They say that the limitation on ingredients really hinders, experimentation and making different flavors and things like that. So they say German beer is limited by the Reinheitsgebot. I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, Germany makes the best, wheat beers, the best Helles, the best lager beers in the world. I don't really see any reason to make anything else, to be quite honest. Okay, so back to the American craft brews. And so right now there's about 10,000 craft breweries in the United States, and they actually make up about 25% of the beer market in the United States. So a pretty significant portion of the market. And, like I said, a lot of them are pretty good. There's a lot of IPAs, which I don't really like. But I also mentioned that they're really expensive. So typically, when I'm in the United States, I rarely drink or buy any beer or wine for that matter, because to me, it's too expensive and it's just not that good. So I just wait until I come back to Europe to have beer. But sometimes I do say, yeah, maybe I'd like to have a beer. So my beer buying experience in the United States typically goes something like this. I'll go to the store and, I say, I'd like to have a beer. I go to the beer section and I'm looking around and I think, well, I'd like to try, some of the locally brewed beers, right? So I start looking around and usually they have a pretty big selection. And the first thing I notice, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of IPA here. I'm not a big fan of IPA. I wonder what else they have. So I started looking, and then the next thing I notice, I'm like, wow, it's really expensive. This is about twice as much as what I would pay in Germany. So that's two strikes against it. And then the next thing I'll notice, like, wow, they have some type of European beer there. And like, well, I know this is good. I like this. And then I'll look, well, it's the same price as this American microbrew. Something I don't know if I like or not, but I do know I like this. So normally I'll either end up buying a European beer while I'm in the United States, or I just won't buy anything and I'll just wait till I come back to Germany to drink beer. Dining out is even is worse than that, actually. It's even more expensive when you go dining out. And so a lot of these craft breweries, microbreweries in the United States, a lot of them have establishments where they also sell food. So they have like a brewery and a bar and grill or something like that. And they're very common. They're all around the U.S. So one such establishment I went to in Seattle, Washington, and this is pretty typical of most of the of the craft brew bar and grills you'll find all around the United States. So this place, I went there with my family, and so they have 16 different types of beer on tap. And so that's a lot of variety. And I kind of wonder, how do they keep all that beer fresh? I mean, are people really constantly ordering all different 16 types? I don't know, but they have 16 types of beer on tap. Of those 16, I said, a lot of them are normally IPAs. So of those 16, 6 are IPAs and 1 is just a pale ale. So basically, almost half of what they offer is some type of pale ale, right? I don't know why they make so many pale ales, but they do. So we got 16 beers, 7 are a pale ale, 2 are stouts, 1 is a cider, 1 is a lager, what we would call in Germany a Hell or a Helles. Lager is a German word that means to store, by the way, if English speakers, if you didn't know that. They have a Pilsner, they have a Belgian blonde, they have a cherry sour. I'm not sure what that is. They have an amber, a brown ale, a barley wine, and a seltzer. So that's all the beers they offer on tap. And so most of those are served in a 16-ounce glass at this place, which is 16 ounces, a little bit less than half a liter, a little bit less than your standard German beer. But if they have a really high alcohol content, some of them have more alcohol, and those are served in smaller glasses, either 8 ounce or 12 ounces, depending on how much alcohol is in the beer. All right, and so the cost of these beers, the price, they are $8.50 per beer, and based on the exchange rate today, that would be about €8.22 you'd pay for beer. And don't forget, in the United States, you're expected to tip your server about 20% of your bill. Because we don't pay our wait staff enough money; they have to survive on tips. So you pay $8.50 for a beer, and then you're expected to add about 20% on top of that to tip your server. So it can be very expensive drinking and dining out in the United States. All right, so now let's look at Germany. And so we looked at Seattle, Washington, which is a pretty expensive city in the United States. So we'll look at Munich, which I believe may be the most expensive city in Germany. So it should be a pretty good comparison, right? Now we're going to go to Munich. A lot of people consider that the heart of the German brewing company. It's certainly the heart of Bavarian brewing industry. And we're going to go to my favorite brewery, Augustiner, right? So, and they have a restaurant, a brewery restaurant. They have a couple, but they have one in particular. It's in the heart of Munich, really in the heart of tourist Munich, right? So that's where we're going to go to have our beer and our meal, right? So Augustiner, in comparison to the brewery in the United States, Augustiner only has 3 types of beer on tap, so a much more limited selection. So they have a Hell, or you might call it a Helles, and this is what we would call a lager in the United States. So me, this is I love it. It's like drinking liquid gold, I would say. And so if you go to the Augustiner in Munich, a half a liter of beer is going to cost you €4.60. Or about $4.75. That's if you want the standard half liter of beer. Now, if you want to go with the big full liter, Oktoberfest style of beer, it's going to be exactly twice as much. So that's going to be €9.20. All right. So another beer they offer, which is really very similar to the Helles, but they call it Edelstoff, and that means that it's brewed with only the select best of the best ingredients, right? So it has more select ingredients, so it's a little more expensive, and so it costs €4.80 for a half liter of beer, as opposed to €4.60 for the normal Helles. And then the third beer that they offer on tap is a Dunkel, or what we call a dark beer in the United States. And this is supposed to be an old Munich specialty. And the Dunkel is also €4.80. And those two are also just twice as much. You can get those in a 1 liter glass as well, and they're exactly twice as much. And so Augustiner also offers what's called a Radler, and this is a mixture of beer and cola, something similar to Sprite, I would say. And it's for someone who wants to drink beer, but maybe they don't want all the alcohol, so they cut it down with a little bit of Sprite. And also another thing that's catching on in Germany, a lot more people are drinking alcohol-free beer, especially athletes, people who want to go hiking and stuff like that, because they want beer. And a lot of people say beer is a great recovery drink, but they just don't want the alcohol effect. So actually, alcohol-free beer is actually getting more and more popular in Germany. All right, so for me personally, I would much rather take the selection of beer at Augustiner with only 3 beers on tap. And you can also get, well, I don't have it with me, but you can also get a delicious Hefeweizen, if you will, a wheat beer. But that is not on tap. Those are sold in bottles. And so Germany, I think, has better beer. I think it has better food as well. And they're much better prices. And also, you're not expected to tip nearly as much in Germany as you are in the United States because their servers make a living wage. So typically, you would round up, a little bit, maybe to the next 5 euro or something like that. But tips are not really expected. And they're certainly not expected at the level as they are in the United States. All right, so I say, who needs like so much variety when you can have the best beer, right? And that's just the way I look at it. But ultimately, it comes down to personal taste and what you're willing to pay for. I know a lot of people who have plenty of money to spend as much as they want on beer, who live in the United States, and they really prefer, kind of this weak, tasteless, American beer. That's just what they like. And when you offer them something else, maybe they'll taste it and like, ooh, that's gross or whatever. And they have money, they could buy anything. And and that's just one example of taste. And some people will drink nothing but Trappist beers, and they'll travel all over the world just to go to like every Trappist monastery to get their beer. So it's just, and I guess they've got a lot of money to spend too. So it just depends on personal taste. Me, I'll take a great Augustiner Helles or a Meiselbrau Hefeweizen, occasionally a Dunkel or Bockbier. And when I'm in Cologne, I always drink Kolsch there. So I think it's fine, but ultimately it's up to personal taste, of course. So I just don't need a lot of variety. All right, so that's my take on the beers, comparing beers in the United States and Germany and a little bit in Belgium. I hope you found this interesting. And if you did, be sure to hit that like button and consider subscribing to our channel and following along as we travel throughout Germany, throughout Europe, North America, and beyond. So thanks for joining us, and leave us a comment. Let us know, what's your favorite beer? What do you like to drink? Maybe you don't like to drink beer. So what do you drink? Do you drink totally non-alcoholic beverages, or what do you prefer? Let us know. We love hearing from you, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.